it was really important to me to show a couple who was separated, but still put their daughter and put their child first, because that was something that I really admire my parents for, making sure that he and I never felt the fighting and whatever caused their divorce. That was really important to me to include in part of my book as well.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Writing Inspirations with Markee Books. Here we have our new guest for today. Say hello to Megan Bowen. Hello Megan, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm fine. Thank you for joining us today. So tell me, Megan, how did you become a writer?
So I have been a reader my whole life. I can vividly recall the very first time I cracked open a book and read it by myself. And just that instant spark of here's a way for me to have an escape and to be in different worlds and to do things that I'll never get to do and see things I'll never get to see. So reading has always been a really huge part of my life. As a child, I would read like a chapter book a day. I was a huge reader. And then I went to get an English degree out of a state school here in California. And obviously a lot of reading and writing involved in that. And then I went on to be an English teacher, actually, a high school English teacher, which I really enjoyed. But my first and last year was actually during the pandemic.
Oh.
So you can imagine how fun that was. And then I got pregnant actually with my first son, and kind of just decided with the way things were going, being a public educator, that I would take a break and stay home with my kid. And when he was about 11 months old, I just got this inspiration. I was reading a lot, more than I had in my adult life in a long time, because I'd been so busy with work and school and everything. And so when I had this baby at home with me, I spent a ton of time reading when I was, feeding him or during his naps, all that stuff. I was reading a lot of romance. I just kind of was hit with this idea, and I sat down and started to write it. I actually wrote so much of it on my phone because I was sitting with him.
That's impressive. I honestly, I can write on my phone. Not too long. My fingers just...
I don't think I could do it again, but at the time I just could not get the story out of my head. And so I wrote about half of it, and then I got pregnant again, actually right when my son hit a year. We had a little surprise that was my daughter. So as you can imagine, I was very tired taking care of a toddler and then being pregnant. And so I actually set the story aside for a long time, probably close to a year and a half. That whole time I kept thinking about it, but I wasn't sure if I'd ever get around to finishing it. And then right around the time my daughter hit about 10 months old. So for some reason that 10-month period seems to be when I get inspiration. I think I'm finally sleeping a little bit more. And so my brain's like, hey, I have an idea. But I also started a book Instagram roughly around the same time in February of this year. And I found a huge community there of like-minded people who loved reading.
The Bookstagrammers.
Yes, the Bookstagrammers. I love my Bookstagrammers. So this is a huge community of primarily women who are unapologetic romance readers, who really shout out and hype up indie authors. And I just found, like I said, a huge community here. And through that and through seeing a lot of other indie authors publishing and self-publishing, I just kind of got that spark again to finish the story. And in my head, I was going, okay, well, I actually have a little bit of an audience. I don't have a huge online presence, but it's, almost 2,000 people. That's something.
Yeah.
That's some people that, would be willing to read my story. And they were all so interested in it and wanted to read it and hear about it. So that kind of convinced me to finish the story. So that's kind of how I started to write this full story. I've always been interested in writing, but this is the first time I've ever sat down and wrote a full-length novel.
Oh, so before that you were like outlining, creating the idea, and now it's that you created like the full book. How long did it take you to finish it?
So I would say if we take out the break that I took, which I won't count that towards the writing time, but I'd say maybe 5 months if I consolidate the time that I started writing at the start and then when I picked it back up again. It was about 2 to 3 months to finish it, and that was just the first draft, right? And then you have to. There's so many other drafts to do. Like I'm still in the editing process.
No, but that's very nice for a first time. 5 months is very good number.
Yeah. I think, like I said, just being a reader kind of helps you understand story structure. And I mean, I had written stuff before, like in college, I took a lot of creative writing classes, but I had never written like a full length novel. I wrote a lot of poetry and short stories and like academic papers, but this was the first time that I had like written a creative work of fiction.
Yeah, I can see that. So, do you like inspired in a specific author or writer?
So yeah, I have a lot of authors I admire. I think for different parts. So it might surprise you because I wrote a romance novel, but I love Stephen King actually. I think his storytelling is really impressive and immersive. And he's somebody that I've read a lot of. And so I'm sure in some ways I've taken some like bits and pieces from him, if not the horror element, then some of the ways he does like characterization and stuff. As far as some like romance authors I love, I really, really admire Jessica Joyce, Tara DeWitt, Ali Samberts, and Amanda Gamble. Amanda Gamble wrote a contemporary sort of rom-com called Honestly, I'm Totally Faking It that I absolutely adored. And it was one of the books where I was like, yes, this is what I love to read.
Yeah, I think I saw the book on Instagram once.
Yeah, probably. It's like an orange and pink cover. It's a super well done romance. It's funny. It's heartfelt. It's a little bit sexy. It's got kind of everything in it.
Okay, so are you self-published or traditional?
So I'm gonna go the self-publishing route. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, you haven't published yet.
No. So my book will come out March 17th of 2025.
Oh, I still doing some checks, or it's for a specific reason?
For indie publishing. Yeah. So part of the reason I walked into indie publishing is because I really liked the creative freedom that came with it. Because sometimes with traditional publishing, you don't always get to choose your cover or even choose your editor.
I know we make in Markee Books, we make covers, and we always struggle with the publishers of some people that always I get angry because usually our clients don't understand that. And then when they came with their new cover to their publisher, the publishers get angry and then they said that they won't use it. It's very annoying.
Yeah, it's a mess. So I just, for my first book, I wanted to do indie publishing because I liked the creative control. I also liked that with indie publishing, I could really choose the turnaround time. And because I had an Instagram audience that I was growing, that I've been growing, I saw the merit in trying to get it out sooner when I have this audience who's excited to hear about the book and see the book.
Are you planning to make a website or something?
I do have a website actually. Yeah. It's authormeganbowen.com. So I've got my book on there. I have a blog. I have a newsletter that you're welcome to sign up to if you're interested in all the like home updates.
That's nice.
Yeah.
So how it's like your writing experience these days? How do you feel?
Yeah, so I have a couple different things going on. So I do have I have a book that I'm writing that's sort of independent of the book that's coming out in March, and then I have another book that's coming out, that I'm writing. I don't want to get too ahead of myself. We'll see if I can finish another one. That's always the fear, right? But I have another one that's sort of interconnected to the book that's going to be publishing in March that I'm currently working on. And it's a little bit different. It's still going to be contemporary romance, but this one will have some like magical realism elements to it. So it'll be a little bit different and kind of fun to write because you get to kind of play around a little more.
It's okay. Most writers, at least the most seasoned that I know, write at least 2 to 3 per year.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's good enough, to be honest.
Yeah. No, I don't want to do too much and get myself overwhelmed. So I have about 10 to 12,000 words of one book that I kind of set aside because I got this other idea. And if I can get it all done, I will probably try to publish it in the fall of next year. Just depends on how everything goes with it. But
And it's better like that, because sometimes when you publish very similar books, sometimes one of your books might take attention from the other.
yeah.
Unless they are extremely different and have different audience, I think it can happen. It can work.
Yeah.
Or unless they are from a series.
Yeah. So it's kind of interconnected. It's not quite a series, but I kind of drop an Easter egg for the book that I'm currently writing and the book that will be published in March. So yeah, it'll be cool.
Actually, my publisher told me that I should finish a series and just publish everything together. He said that those usually sell well when you publish more than one.
Okay, that makes sense.
For example, you know that how J.K. Rowling, when Harry Potter came up, she published the first 4 together.
Oh, I didn't know.
Before the others came later years.
I did not know that. How interesting. That's cool. I grew up loving and reading Harry Potter, but I had no idea. That's really cool.
Yeah, I do remember because my mom bought the four first book together on the library. So, what's the thing you struggled the most when you started writing?
The thing I struggled with the most, so in a lot of contemporary romance, the climax tends to be that the couple breaks up, right? Because it's a book about the couple. It's a book about them getting together and having a relationship. And so for the conflict, a lot of times authors go with what's known as a third act breakup, right? It's the thing right before the end, they break up, something happens to separate them. And then the finale is that they get together and live happily ever after. I kind of hate the third act breakup. And you can write a romance novel without them, but it tends to be really difficult to do. And so with my book, I really wanted to not have a third act breakup. And everything was chugging along fine until I got to that sort of climax area. And I went, oh, I see why people do the third act breakup. So I don't have a third act breakup in my book.
I think it can work.
It can work.
When the book is not only about the romance.
Exactly. And so that's really what I work to do, because my book, like Home, sort of has a dual storyline. So it starts out with Summer, who is, she leaves her ex of 7 years, and they have a child together. And the whole sort of reason she leaves him is because she's a romance reader. And she realizes, she's like, this guy does not treat me anything like the guy in these books treat these ladies. And she doesn't want these grand gestures necessarily, but she's like, he doesn't even remember my birthday. He doesn't take me on dates. Like, this guy just does not do anything that I've been asking of him for years. And so she kind of finally gets the guts to break up with him and to try something new. And it's sort of complicated because they have a child together. And the sort of additional conflict outside of her meeting this new guy is her and her ex, because he's sort of realizing, okay, she's not coming back. She's going with somebody else. So he essentially tries to leverage their daughter against her. And so that's kind of the additional conflict in the book. And so it's like a dual storyline there. It's the same characters, but it's sort of the two separate plot lines, like her and her new relationship and her sort of navigating these complex family dynamics and figuring out how to, how to co-parent and be in a different type of relationship with the man she's been with since she was like a teenager. So that's sort of how I navigated avoiding the third act breakup, as I kind of gave her drama in another part of her life that she would have to figure out.
Actually, that's a good idea. I think it does make it more rounded on their characters.
Yeah. And I mean, it was important to me because I have divorced parents. I grew up in a sort of multi-household family, and it was really important to me to show a couple who was separated, but still put their daughter first and put their child first, because that was something that I really admire my parents for. They have their faults, of course, but as far as raising my brother and I, making sure that he and I never felt the fighting and whatever caused their divorce. That was really important to me to include in part of my book as well. And so part of my tagline for the book is that these are like emotionally mature characters, because a lot of times in books like this, when you have like children in the mix and everything, the parents tend to revert to like childlike behavior and calling each other names and everything. And so it's like, I want to make sure that they can kind of set a little bit of an example and show how it can work.
And usually on this genre, I always see as young couples, like 22.
Yeah, well, and my main character is she's 25, and she had her child at 18, so like got pregnant in high school and had the baby sort of right after, and so it's kind of this rediscovery of herself as an adult, because all she's ever known is this one guy she's been with since she was a kid, and she's learning who she is outside of that relationship and learning that it's okay to ask for more and you should have a partner who cares to give that to you.
Yeah, I assume they were forced to marry because of the baby.
So they didn't get married necessarily, but they lived together. They got engaged. They did the whole thing. But it was sort of, they sort of felt like this is what we're supposed to do. Like we have a child together, so we're supposed to stay together. And the guy in that relationship, his name is Jared, he gets very like complacent and just like, you should already know that I care about you and love you, so why should I have to show you? And she's saying like, we have to try to keep that spark alive. We have to, we have to try for each other, because if we don't try, like, that's not a relationship to be in. And eventually it just gets sort of to a breaking point where she's like, I can't keep doing this, and breaks it off with him. And it's, the book kind of jumps in right when he's moving out, and you see her sort of trying to navigate being a single parent and co-parenting and wanting more out of a relationship. And so it got a lot more emotional than I thought it would, because when I set out to write the book, I wanted to just write like a lighthearted rom-com, and that's not how it turned out.
Yeah, a Hallmark movie.
Yeah, that was the original plan, and then it didn't work because I needed more conflict.
Okay. So tell me, do you have like a writing routine? Outlining, pre-planning, etc.
So I'm what they call a pantser. I just absolutely fly by the seat of my pants. I have like a general idea of where I want things to end up, but I definitely just kind of sit down and write, and things sort of change on the fly. I will outline here and there, like when I was coming up to the climax of my book, I sat down and outlined kind of how I wanted that to go, just so I had points to kind of jump from. But even then I ended up changing things as I was writing. So it's kind of hard as a stay-at-home mom. I write when I have the time, and most of the time that's during nap time or after my kids go to bed. So I kind of just sit down and jump into it. I just kind of go for it. I like to try to have it be as quiet as I can. I have little squishy things to hold on to like mess with while I'm writing, because I have to like keep my hands moving. But yeah, I write from my dining room table. I don't have a fancy office. So yeah, it's kind of a very homegrown operation right now. But yeah, no outlining for.
I think everyone needs some release of stress, even on writing. I actually have something too, a hairbrush.
Hey,
I just touch the hairs.
Yeah, no, I just got this. This is a really good one. It's called the Nido, and it's like it's a little stress ball kind of thing. It's nice.
Oh yeah, I do know some writers that had like a slime and then touch slime.
There you go. You got to distract your brain with something else.
Exactly. So, did you ever have like writer's block?
Yeah. So writer's block, I definitely dealt with it here and there. Luckily, it wasn't anything that was super long lived. I really struggled the most once I kind of got to the climax, because I actually, in my head, what I imagined would be the climax of the story actually ended up being more towards the middle. And so, so I was like, okay, well, that didn't work as a climax. So now I have to kind of keep going and figure out what will be the climax. And so once I got to that part of the story, it took me a minute, because one of my pet peeves in writing is when situations, like especially when it's like contemporary fiction or contemporary romance, if people behave in a way that is unusual or you wouldn't think somebody would behave, it's really hard to write about rational adults having a conflict, because you know what happens, but you don't want to write something, at least for me, I didn't want to write something so far-fetched. So yeah, I had to kind of create this villain, but I had to give him a reason for being the villain. So I had to sort of try to figure out, how is he going to cause disruption? How am I going to make it make sense? And so I wrote the climax, and then I had to go back in through the story and like plant little seeds towards, what would be the climax. And so that was kind of difficult, because it was hard to envision a way for adults to do what I wanted them to do in the story, and still make like logical sense, I guess, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. So do you feel that you changed since you started writing?
Do I feel that I changed since I started writing?
Yeah.
I think so in some ways, because like I said, I've always been very creative and been interested in writing and reading. But now that I've been writing much more, like in my free time, I find myself looking for how I would write what I'm experiencing, if that makes sense. So I'll think about like this emotion, like how would I write this? How would I depict this on the page? And so that's interesting. I think in some ways that's a good way to kind of step out of your situation and view it from a different lens. But at the same time, sometimes I think it makes me like intellectualize things a little bit too much, like think about things outside of myself a little too much, instead of actually sitting down and dealing with whatever it is I'm dealing with. So that's definitely a change. I think in some ways I've gained confidence through writing, especially writing about my main character, because she is a plus-sized woman, and her story is not at all about the fact that she's plus-sized. And that was very important to me.
That's actually great. I don't feel that there's many that don't do that.
Yeah, so that was something that was really important to me, because I'm a plus-sized woman myself, and when I was going to look for plus-sized books, or books that featured plus-sized main characters, what I wanted was just a regular romance that happened to feature a plus-sized character. And instead, a lot of times what you find is that these romances that feature plus-sized characters, the book is about them being plus-sized. It's how they navigate their size in a relationship, and or even them losing weight to deserve a relationship, or in some way the book is about their self-acceptance journey, or somehow has to do with their size. And that was really important to me to not include that at all. And to just, because I want women who look like me to be able to read a book that has somebody that looks like them, and they are just as deserving of love and affection, and they deserve to feel just as beautiful, and they deserve to have that book-worthy romance no matter their size. And it doesn't have to be this like huge part of their identity. Like your size doesn't have to be this huge part of who you are. It shouldn't be any different than like the color of your hair or the color of your eyes. So that boosted my confidence, I think, because I had to write her be confident, or at least ambivalent, because I didn't want her to constantly be mentioning her size either. So she just lived and existed as a plus-sized woman, and that was kind of empowering to write. Like there was no like diet talk in her head. There was no like mean mother-in-law that mentioned her size. Like there was none of that. And so that was
Yeah,
really refreshing to write.
it happens a lot. And now that you mentioned it, I'm thinking about it.
It really does. I mean, the plus sized character tends to be like, if you think about like in movies, the plus sized character is almost always the funny person who's on the outskirts, who nobody's really interested in, their comedic relief. If they do get a romance story, they have to have this like huge makeover to be attractive and to be seen as worthy of love.
Or a joke relationship of sorts.
Yes.
Like
yes.
they got like the super confident fat woman found like a super hot man, outscreens, and then she just like, hey, he's my boyfriend, and all the other characters are, oh,
exactly. And that's what I didn't want. I wanted it to just, because the thing is, like, it happens in real life all the time. All the time are there plus sized men or plus sized women in relationships with just regular people. You know, it doesn't have to be this whole big thing. And I also found in books about plus sized characters, they're written in a way that I think is meant to be empowering, and it can be, but they're written in this way of like, I'm fat and I'm proud, and here's me like being very outspoken about the fact that I'm like a plus sized woman. And that's fine, but I don't think most plus size women exist in that headspace. Like most of us are just going through our life, like wanting to be in a nice relationship and wanting the regular things that everyone wants out of life. And so I wanted to write a character that was just that. Like her size is only mentioned in times of like descriptors, like so the reader will know what she looks like, but it's not something that is ever looked down upon, or even something that she's like, I'm plus sized and proud. Like it's just a thing about her. It's just the same as the color of her hair.
right. Okay. Well, changing topic a bit. Do you have like a story of how you named your book?
Oh, so the name was so hard for me. I really, really struggled. So I landed on Like Home because I was trying so hard to find something that was kind of catchy, that would stick with people, but that sort of exemplified the book. And in my head, I always imagined sort of what the cover would look like, right? Like as I was getting close to the end. And if you've seen the cover, it's the two main characters, Summer and Ryan, sitting in her kitchen, like in front of her big bay window. And she's reading a book and he's kind of like looking at her lovingly. And anyway, I always kind of imagined it there. And so one of the main reasons that Ryan is like, one of his main struggles is that he's trying to find somewhere where he feels like he can sort of set down roots and I guess find a place to belong. And so in the end, they're like home to each other. They are the people who make the other person like as comfortable as they can be, and they feel good to be themselves and all of this stuff. And so I ended up landing on Like Home. So I originally started out with Like Home to Me. And then I was like, no, that's too long. I don't really like that. So I shortened it to Like Home. And I just ended up really liking the way that that sounded. But yeah, naming the book was a challenge. It took me a long time to land on that.
Yeah, usually people Google if there are other books called like that.
I probably should have done that, but I didn't. There's one other book that's called Like Home, but I think it's a completely different genre. So
I think it's fine in that way.
Hopefully that'll work out.
Yeah, usually there's no so much problem if it's a different genre.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a bit about your recent work you're doing right now?
Yeah. So the book that I'm working on right now, I'm not going to say the title.
Of course.
But
you mentioned it's like a spin-off.
Sort of. So in Like Home, Summer is a huge reader, and you see her read all these different books that I made up. I didn't input any like actual real world books. I just made up synopses for these books that she was reading. And she has conversations about them with different people throughout the story. And anyway, one of those books that I sort of made up when I was writing Like Home, a ton of my beta readers were like, I looked for this book everywhere and I couldn't find it. Is it real? Like, did you just make it up? And I was like, I just made it up. So I ended up really liking the concept and the idea of it. So I started writing it. And so it's kind of like, I don't know what you'd call that, like a multiverse, because there's the like home universe, and then there's the fiction book that she's reading, and then you'll get to read one of those fiction books. So it has some magical realism. It's going to have like a little bit of a murder mystery element. So it's going to be really different than Like Home, because Like Home is very much like a domestic drama, sort of, with a lot of romance. And it's very feel good. And the book that I'm working on now is also pretty feel good, and it'll be lighthearted, but it has those elements of magical realism. And like I said, a little bit of a murder mystery, which will be interesting to write. That's intimidating to me because I've never written anything like that, but I think it'll be fun.
Oh yeah, that actually is interesting. Yeah, and that's answered my question if you were going to adventure in other genres.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it'll still fit in with contemporary romance, but I don't know. It won't quite be like a romantasy, because it's not like a high fantasy mixed with a romance. It'll be, like I said, like it'll have some magical realism. I don't know if that's necessarily its own genre or not, but it'll be a little bit different from Like Home.
I think it is. Actually, yes, you probably know it better than me how many tags are these days.
Yes.
Like, too much.
Yeah.
Just recently I learned that there's one called Coffee Shop AU.
Oh. Huh. Yeah, I've never heard of that.
It's like stories based on coffee shops. Usually romance.
Oh, okay. So like the subgenres. Yeah, there's so many of those. Yeah. Like cozy fantasy, cozy romance. Yeah. Even like cozy thriller, which I find interesting.
Exactly. Friends to relations, or enemies to lovers.
Mm-hmm.
Friends to lovers. It's what it was called.
Yeah.
I guess in your case, you could say it's start like lovers to enemies.
Yeah. So with Like Home, it's sort of like friends to lovers, but they're friends for a very short period of time before they become lovers. And in this new book, it's sort of like friends to lovers, I guess. But they both start out with the intention of like, I like this other person, I would like to be with them at some point, and then we kind of go from there and navigate how they get there in the end.
Exactly. So do you have like any advice for new writers starting up now?
Any advice? I think my biggest piece of advice is to just sit down and write. And I know that sounds like bad advice, but let me elaborate.
Of course.
So I have started so many other stories in my folder on my computer. I have so many drafts of books that will probably never be finished. Chapters and chapters of different books that I've written over the last like probably 10 years. And you just never know what will actually click and become a full book for you. So I think sitting down and just doing the practice of writing, like even if it doesn't go anywhere, like I think for me, part of the reason I finished this book was because I didn't necessarily have this like very specific end goal in mind. I was doing it for the joy of writing and because I had a story in my head that I wanted to get out. So I think if you're just starting out and you've never been able to finish something before, and you really want to, publish your first book, you want to get there, I think you have to really step out of that business side of your head and really embrace the creative side, because that's what's going to get you there. And you could worry about all the business stuff later. Like you just have to get that first draft done, and to really appreciate that the first draft does not have to be perfect. It's not something that you have to sit there and, ponder over and stress about. Like you just have to get it out. And even if it ends up looking like word vomit when you're done, you can always go back
I get it.
Refinish it and refresh it. There's this really great book on writing that I read in college, and it's by Anne Lamont, but she has this chapter. It's like, I think it's the first chapter in the book. It's called Shitty First Drafts. And it's literally just about that. Like, just get your writing out on page, just do it. Don't be too worried. Don't be too in your head. You just have to get the words out on paper, and then you can really go in and finesse it from there. Because I mean, I've edited like home at this point. I think I'm on my like 5th round of edits. Like there's a lot of refining that happens later.
Right. So, what do you think is like your largest goal for the future as a writer?
My largest goal in the future, I think I don't really have any aspirations to be on like any bestsellers lists. For the most part, I just want to write stories that people connect with and that make them feel good. And so I don't know that I'll always have a plus-sized heroine as the main character, but most of my books will probably feature plus-sized leads because it's a huge goal of mine to make sure people feel seen in books. And yeah, that's super important to me. So making sure that my books feel good, that help people in some way, inspire them.
I just have this idea. You could try like doing like a story about a regular body type person, and then on the sequel, it's now a plus side, but no one really mentioned that. I think I saw something like that before.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, I mean, that's important to me, is to write about plus size characters who just like live their life. And I would love to make writing a career. So like I said, I was a full-time school teacher. But I would love to make a little bit of a living off of writing, at least enough to pay for the next book.
Yeah, of course. That's important. I
Yeah.
suppose you won't go back to school till your children are like 5-year-olds, maybe?
Probably. I mean, I've been sort of on the fence about if I would go back to teach public high school or not. Or I've also thrown around the idea of getting a master's and teaching at the college level, because I do have a couple local colleges around me, but we'll just see. If the writing thing pans out, then I probably won't do it. But if it ends up not working out the way I hope, then I'll probably go and teach something at the college level. That's kind of the next step eventually. My youngest is 1, so I still have a few years to figure it out.
Do you have like a support network with other writers? You mentioned Bookstagrammers, so I suppose you do. Do you have beta readers?
I've had beta readers before, yeah, and I really enjoyed that experience. So I think I had like 6 beta readers my first round. And so that was really helpful because they saw it before I think I had done maybe 1 or 2 rounds of edits. And so they really helped me kind of pick up those things that when you're writing your own story, you just don't see after you've read it through. They helped me sort of figure out if my intentions were clear, if characters were behaving the way in my head I wanted them to, if it was coming across to readers that way. So yeah, I've had beta readers, and then my editor is also a professional beta reader. So she did a professional beta read for me, and that's been helpful also. And then as far as like a community of writers, definitely on Bookstagram, I've met quite a few. One of the ones that's helped me out so much, her name is Catherine Brew, and she wrote The Trials of Darkness, which will be published in January, I believe, of next year. And she's just been an amazing resource for me because she's self-publishing as well, and it's her first time, and her and I just chat back and forth. I can always ask her any questions I have about it, and she's always willing to help me. So yeah, she's been a huge support. Ali Samberts has been a huge support. Yeah, so there's been a lot of people that have been willing to answer my questions and help me sort of navigate it, because it feels like you write your first draft and you're like, okay, I'm done, but you're not done. You have so much more to do. And so those people have really helped me figure out the next steps.
Yeah. So what would you say are your plans for the future after you publish? Are you going to be going to events to promote yourself or something?
I'm not entirely sure. I don't have anything in specific lined up for next year. I would like to do a couple of conventions in California.
I know there's some.
There's a few. There's a couple coming up next year for romance. I don't know that I'll travel super far for it quite yet, but I would love to do some conventions and maybe get into a couple local bookstores and see if I could do some signings or meet the author type events.
Well, I think in San Diego and San Francisco you can find some stuff, but I think that's a little bit far from California.
San Diego's in California. So I know that there's a convention in San Jose next year called Love and Tech, I believe, because it's in Silicon Valley. So that's their name for it. So I'm going to apply to that one and see if I get in. I don't have anything, like I said, lined up, but for the most part, any place that I'm going to be, you can find on my website at authormeganbowen.com. That will help sort of keep track of me and what I end up doing in the next year. I'm hopeful to do a couple fun things.
Thank you for mentioning that. I was about to ask you about the social media.
Yeah. So author Megan Bowen is my website, and then my Instagram is the same.
Okay. Well, Megan, I think that's all for now. Thank you so much. I hope we can talk again once your book is out.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me on.
Of course. Thank you for coming today to another episode of Writing Inspirations with Markee Books. And thank you, Megan, for accompanying us today.
Of course.
Like and subscribe. See you in another episode. See you later. Bye.